ہمارے اس کے بارے میں سینٹیمنٹس، اس کے بارے میں رائے اور طرح کی ہوتی ہے، کیونکہ ایک پولیٹیکل مسئلہ بھی ہے، لیکن پولیٹیکل مسئلہ اپنی جگہ کے اوپر کشمیر ایک جگہ ہے، اس کے اندر کچھ لوگ بستے ہیں، لاکھوں لوگ بستے ہیں، اس کی ایک تاریخ ہے، اس ریجن کی ایک تاریخ ہے، اس کے اندر بسنے والے لوگوں نے دنیا کے اندر بڑے بڑے نام پیدا کیے ہیں، ایک ریجن ہے جو کہ اپنی جگہ کی وجہ سے بہت کرٹیکل لوکیشن کے اوپر یہ جگہ ہے، اور آج سے نہیں ہمیشہ سے رہی ہے، کوئی تاریخ کا حصہ ایسا نہیں رہا جس کے اندر لوگوں نے اس تک اپنی رسائی کرنے کی، اس کو اپنے قابو میں کرنے کی کوشش نہیں کی، کوئی ریزن تھی، کوئی ایسا ہوتا رہا مسلسل۔ پوسٹ اسلام کے اندر دیکھیں تو محمد بن قاسم سے لے کے پھر محمود غزنوی کے ٹائم سے لے کے پھر اکبر بادشاہ کے وقت کے اندر، اس کے بعد پھر اسلام کا آنا جانا، ہم جانتے ہیں کہ کشمیر ایک ایسی جگہ ہے، ہم کشمیری برہمنوں کا بہت ذکر سنتے ہیں، لیکن آج ہم بات کرتے ہیں تو ہم دیکھتے ہیں کشمیر کے اندر میجورٹی مسلمانوں کی ہے۔ کیا آپ نے سوچا کبھی کہ مسلمان کیسے ہوئے؟ یہ ساری جو اتنی مسلم میجورٹی کا ایریا کشمیر آج کہلاتا ہے، تو اس کے اندر مسلمان جو میجورٹی کے اندر ہیں، یہ ایک برہمنوں کا جو ایک گڑھ تھا، اس کے اندر مسلمان کی تعداد آباد کیسے ہو گئے؟ سوچنے کی چیزیں ساری نا، مطلب ہے کہ جب تک ہم ان چیزوں کے بارے میں جانتے نہیں ہیں، ہسٹری کو نہیں جانتے، تاریخ کو نہیں جانتے، لوگوں کو نہیں جانتے، تب تک ہم کسی کے ساتھ تعلق کی بنیاد کے اوپر اس کے ساتھ اپنے سینٹیمنٹس اٹیچ نہیں کر پاتے۔ ہماری جو بھی سینٹیمنٹس ہوتے ہیں وہ خبری ہوتے ہیں، مطلب کہ جو ہم نے خبر سن لی کہ وہاں پہ دھماکہ ہو گیا، وہاں پہ اتنے لوگ مر گئے، تو ہمارے سینٹیمنٹس دونوں طرف سوئنگ کرتے رہتے ہیں، ہندوستانی لوگوں کی اور طرح سے سوئنگ کریں گے، چائنیز لوگوں کی اور طرح سے سوئنگ کریں گے، پاکستانیوں کی اور طرح سے سوئنگ کریں گے، کیونکہ ہم اگین اپنی طرح سے چیز کو دیکھتے ہیں، اس کے بارے میں اپنے احساسات کا اظہار کرتے ہیں اور اس کو دیکھتے ہیں۔ تو آج کی کوشش یہ ہے، آج ظفر صاحب بنگش صاحب ہمارے ساتھ موجود ہیں، ظفر بنگش صاحب کو کشمیر کے حوالے سے اگر ہم کسی بندے کو کہہ سکتے ہیں کہ نارتھ امریکہ میں کسی نے اس کشمیر کے ریجن کو اور اس مسئلے کو ہائی لائٹ رکھا ہے، ہمیشہ لائن لائٹ کے اندر رکھا ہے، تو ظفر صاحب جو پچھلے 30-35 سال سے ہی کام کر رہے ہیں ماشاء اللہ۔ تو ہم ان کا شکریہ بھی ادا کرتے ہیں کہ وہ اس اتنے اگریسولی اور اتنے محبت کے ساتھ اس سارے مسئلے کو لے کے چلتے ہیں اور اپنا مسئلہ سمجھتے ہیں اس چیز کو۔ تو ہماری خوش قسمتی ہے کہ انہوں نے ہمیں وقت دیا، آج ان سے گزارش کی کہ آ کے ہمیں اکیڈمیکلی، ایک تو ہوتا ہے کہ جلسوں والے ریٹرک جو ہوتے ہیں کہ کشمیر بنے گا یہ، تو کشمیر بنے گا وہ، تو یہ ٹو ٹن، تو یہ تو وہ، اس سے ذرا ہٹ کے ہم چاہتے ہیں کہ ہمیں تھوڑا سا سمجھائیں، ہمارے بچے بیٹھے ہوئے ہیں، ہماری یوتھ بیٹھی ہوئی ہے، کہ جو کہ اپنی عمر 20 سال ہے، 15 سال ہے، 20-25 سال ہے، تو خبروں میں تو بہت سنتے ہیں کشمیر میں یہ ہو رہا ہے وہ ہو رہا ہے، لیکن ہے کیا؟ تو اس حوالے سے گزارش کی ظفر صاحب سے کہ ہمیں کہ تھوڑا سا اکیڈمیکلی تھوڑا سا سمجھائیں کہ یہ ریجن کیا ہے، تو اس کے لیے انہوں نے ہماری گزارش کو قبول فرما کیا ہے، آج ہمارے ساتھ موجود ہیں۔ اس کے علاوہ ہماری بچیاں ہیں یہاں پہ، اریج ہیں، عمل ہیں، یہ ہماری ممبرس ہیں، آپ سب ان کو بہت طرح سے جانتے ہیں، ظفر صاحب کو بھی جو لوگ آتے ہیں یہاں پہ وہ بہت طرح سے جانتے ہیں، تو تعارف جو میں نے کروایا وہ اس کے محتاج نہیں ہے، لیکن عمل اور اریج نے ایک تھوڑی سی پریزنٹیشن جو کہ ہم چاہتے ہیں کہ ہماری یوتھ اس بات میں زیادہ انوالو ہو، تو ایک 5-10 منٹ کی انہوں نے پریزنٹیشن تیار کی ہے، تو ہم چاہیں گے کہ اس سے ابتدا کریں۔ بات بہت ہو سکتی ہے اقبال اور کشمیر کے اوپر، مجھے نہیں پتا ظفر صاحب کتنی بات کریں گے آج اور کشمیر پہ کتنی بات کریں گے آج، لیکن میں ابھی کیونکہ ٹائم بہت آگے جا چکا ہے تو اس لیے میں تھوڑی سی اپنی باتوں کو پیچھے لے کے آتا ہوں، کوشش کرتے ہیں کہ ظفر صاحب جو آئے ہوئے ان سے سنیں، اور عمل اریج سے ہم آغاز کرتے ہیں کہ آئیں، اپنی پریزنٹیشن جو تیار کی ہے اس سے ہمیں تھوڑا سا وارم اپ دیں، تھوڑا سا چلائیں۔ عمل اور اریج کشمیر کے اوپر کیا پریزنٹیشن تیار کی ہوچے؟ اسٹریٹجک امپورٹنس آف کشمیر، آئیے بسم اللہ، یہ آپ کا نوٹس پڑھا آئیے۔ آپ اسکرین میں ہیں تو آپ بولو۔
السلام علیکم everyone. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay, I hope everyone's doing well. I hope everyone had a great summer. So, when Amal and I, when our whole family, we found out that we were going to be studying Kashmir in this Iqbal session, we wanted to do some research. We wanted to figure out and fill in the gaps of what do we know about Kashmir, what do we need to read up on. So we found some pretty interesting things, and this isn't going to be as in-depth as what we're going to be learning, but this is just going to be a baseline knowledge, and we found out just some general information, so that's kind of what we're going to be touching on upon our presentation today. So this is a map of Kashmir, and basically Kashmir borders 4 countries. We have China, Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan. On the map you can see that Pakistan controls Gilgit-Baltistan and Azad Kashmir, India controls Jammu and Kashmir. China controls Shaksam Valley and Aksai Chin. Something interesting that I found out while I was doing my research includes the flags of Kashmir. So there's two basic flags that you see over here. The right one is for Jammu and Kashmir. This is the area that's controlled by India. Sorry, left one. It's my right. It's your left. The left one. The red one, yes. And then the green one is for Azad Kashmir, which is the part of Kashmir that Pakistan controls. The red flag, originally India's side of the flag, was just plain red. Originally, what they did is they picked up the shirt of a man who died during war. The shirt was covered in blood, and they said, this is going to be our flag. Then they updated it. The three stripes on the red flag represent the three areas, Jammu, Kashmir, and Ladakh. And then the symbol in the middle is a plow to represent fertile land. On the left-hand side, the green flag is Pakistan's. The orange part represents the minority population. The green background represents the Muslim majority. The green stripes represent the valleys in Kashmir. The white stripes represent mountain tops. And the star and the crescent pay a tribute to Pakistan, which is the country that they're attached to. So this is just some information about the population demographics. Noman had mentioned it while he was talking. The three dates you see on top from 1901 to 1941 were actually a census that the Britishers conducted while they still ruled in the Indian subcontinent. Basically, the population of Kashmir increased by 1 million during these 40 years. The Muslim population increased by a small percentage, but the Hindu population actually decreased by 3%. The reason is, during this area, a lot of Hindus got up and they left Kashmir to go live in other parts of India. The table you see here, is the table below, is the modern day population of Kashmir, which is around 13.5 million. If you look at the division between Muslim and Hindu, you can see that the only state that has a Hindu majority is Jammu. All the other states have a Muslim majority. Now, Amal's just going to give you some more information on why Kashmir is so strategic.
Hi everyone, my name is Amal, and I'm going to be talking to you guys about what we believe to be the main points behind why Kashmir is so special and important. So I'm going to talk to you guys about tourism, trade routes, and water access, and then Areej is going to end off by talking about defense. Okay, so one of the first things a lot of people think about when Kashmir comes to mind is its beauty, natural beauty, picturesque locations, mountains, valleys, lakes, right? Lots of tourists also think the same, and they do have quite a bit of people coming in to do hikes and treks in that area. Not just this, but I realize that there are lots of religious attractions and historical monuments there as well that do invite people from neighboring countries of Pakistan, India, and China. And one thing that I feel like connects a lot with us, especially women, is that there are lots of small-scale cottage industries in Kashmir that we fully take advantage of, being that they produce shawls and carpets, pottery, other wooden products, and they tend to export lots of that to India and Pakistan and lots of areas in the Middle East. So another really interesting aspect of tourism that I realized while researching was that lots of films are actually produced in Kashmir. Not so much in Azad Kashmir, but lots are in Jammu and Kashmir, being that a while ago the government of Jammu and Kashmir eliminated all taxes on filmmakers for producing films in that location. So it's a pretty easy way to get nice shots for your films and TV shows. So down here there are a couple of films that were produced in Kashmir. So in terms of trade routes, although Afghanistan doesn't own any part of Kashmir, it's one of the major areas that they can have trade back and forth. So they have a really small border with Kashmir, which you can see up there. But because of Afghanistan's location being so closely located to Central Asia, and then that further being connected to areas of Europe, it's a pretty easy way to transport energy deposits like natural gases, oils, uranium, and then also other things like gold and other metals back and forth. And so once that comes into Kashmir, it's also pretty easy to further trade with India, Pakistan, and China. So it's a huge consumer market for those three countries as well. So one of the main points which leads us into today's topic is water access. That being the fact that almost all the major sources of water within Pakistan and India, coming from rivers, are located in Kashmir, specifically originating in Jammu and Kashmir. Water is not just used for drinking or for domestic use, but it's majorly used for electricity generation through hydroelectric dams, as well as for lots of agriculture within that area, and industrial and domestic use throughout Pakistan and throughout India. And so if you can see the map over here, it's not super clear, but almost all the major rivers are originating within the Indian occupied part of Kashmir. And so because of this, when the two countries split, there was a little bit of a discrepancy where they were wondering about how they would both have access to the same water that they were used to having access to before. So that is why in 1960, on September 19th, the World Bank brokered a water distribution treaty between the two countries called the Indus Waters Treaty, and it basically helped to split the water access between the two countries, being that India was given total control of three rivers, being Beas, Ravi, and Satluj, and Pakistan was given control of three rivers, being the Indus River, Chenab, and Jhelum. So now Areej is going to further talk about how this links into defense problems.
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, good. So I just want to point out on the map that the rivers that are circled in red are India has control of them, and then the rivers that are circled in green, Pakistan has control of them. Please note that this river right here, the Indus, it originates in the Himalayan mountains in India, and the Indus is actually Pakistan's largest freshwater source for all of agriculture and farming, and basically it goes all the way down to Karachi, so it's a very important river for us. So this factor kind of ties into the final topic that I'm going to be presenting, which is defense. As Noman mentioned, Kashmir has always been kind of in the center of a conflict. When I was doing my research, I found two main factors for which I thought that defense could be a problem. The first is a potential water crisis. The Indus Water Treaty granted the rights for each country to have access to three rivers. But the way it was divided, Pakistan actually had access to more water than India did. So India was given special provisions that they're allowed to use Pakistan's river for certain things, and then they have to ask permission for doing certain other things to try and balance it out. But since the Indus originates in India, this has caused fears for Pakistan that India can divert water or cause floods by controlling the Indus. The last point regarding defense relates to the location of Kashmir as a buffer zone between the two countries. Since there's so much distrust that Indians have regarding Pakistan and that Pakistan have regarding India, both countries are very interested in having this massive land in between them to not have their positions compromised. The way that Indians think is if Pakistan owns Kashmir, they're going to be very close to New Delhi, which if they capture New Delhi, then that's going to be very bad. Same with Pakistan. If Indians get control of Kashmir, they're going to be very close to Islamabad and Lahore, which is why both countries try and capture control of the region, or they're very interested in the politics of that region. So the way that we're going to end off is just pulling up a quote that I found regarding Iqbal and Kashmir. I'm going to try and read it without butchering it. आज वो कश्मीर है मजबूर फकीर था जिसे अहले नजर कहते थे ईरान सगीर. Kashmir today is under utter subjugation, malice, deprived, and helpless, which was yesterday described as minor Iran by the wise and learned. And it's from his book Armawan Hijaz. Iska?
हाँ बस एक्सप्लेन करो उसको थोड़ा सा शेयर इशारा करो शेयर क्या
I'm not
मतलब
ready for this.
खुद बना दो आज वो कश्मीर
So we know that Iqbal passed away before India and Pakistan split, before all this issue with Kashmir arose, but he could still see that Kashmir has this problem. The Kashmiris aren't rising up and gaining their independence, and they don't have that self-realization that Khudi. So that's what he's describing, right? in
So
this
this
phrase.
again this is before the partition, right?
Yeah.
So there was a time even before partition where that the Kashmiri was maqbool, majboor and faqir. So we know it from this verse of Iqbal that this is not a after partition problem.
No.
The Kashmiri were maqbool, majboor and faqir even before 1947.
Yeah.
All right? It tells us something, right? Have you done any research about that? What kind of problem was there at that time?
No.
Good, okay, excellent. Thank you so much. That's the reason we have the Bangash.
ruled by the Hindu Raja.
Yes, we will know. Exactly. इसलिए हमने ज़फ़र को बुलाया आज.
Hindu
बहुत
Raja.
अच्छे. Thank you so much Amal. Thank you so much Areej. बहुत तालियां बच्चों के लिए बड़ी मेहनत की इन्होंने माशाल्लाह. And this is how we learn. हम करके learn करते हैं, right? अमल आपका अमल नाम है हमारी बच्ची का. किस अमल के अलावा किसको पता है अमल का मतलब क्या होता है? अमल. Good, ये भी अच्छी बात है कि हमें यही पता कि अमल एन से भी होता है, अलिफ से भी होता है. अलिफ वाले अमल का मतलब क्या होता है? होप, उम्मीद. तो ये बच्चे हमारी उम्मीद भी हैं, ये हमारी अमल बच्ची, हमारा अमल वैसे भी है. इकबाल भी कहते हैं कि मेरी शाख अमल का है समर क्या? ये जो हमारी होप की जो शाख है इसका समर क्या है? तो ये बच्चे उसका समर जो हमारे साथ ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं माशाल्लाह चल रहे हैं. एक नात के अंदर भी अमल का लफ्ज आता है. कभी सोचा आपने अमल की मेरे एहसास क्या है, बजुज़ नदामत के पास क्या है? कभी सोचा आपने इसमें अमल कौन से वाला अमल है? एन वाला अमल है. पक्की बात है. कैसे कहेंगे अमल की मेरे एहसास क्या है? जो मैं काम कर रहा हूँ उसकी एहसास क्या है, उसके पीछे रीजनिंग क्या है, बजुज़ नदामत के पास क्या है? अगर हम होप कहेंगे यहाँ पे अलिफ वाला अमल तो ज्यादा मेक सेंस नहीं करता कि जो मुझे उम्मीद वाबस्ता है मुझे इसके एहसास क्या है, इसके पीछे रीजन क्या है, जो मैं इतना पूरी उम्मीद हूँ. हालांकि मेरे अमाल में तो बजुज़ नदामत कुछ भी नहीं है. बजुज़ नदामत के पास क्या है? तो ये अमल के नाम पे थोड़ी सी चीजें याद आई थी, उन्होंने डिस्कस कर ली. जफर बंगश साहब हमारे साथ यहाँ पे मौजूद हैं. बगैर वक्त ज़ाया किए हम उनको इनवाइट करते हैं. उसके बाद इनसे सवाल जवाब भी करेंगे इंशाल्लाह. जफर बंगश साहब आपकी भरपूर तारीफ है. सब देख सकते हैं वहाँ पे थोड़ा access ठीक है. ये थोड़ी सी और ले खाली की रहेगी. स्क्रीन पे ध्यान देगा तो कैमरा नहीं पकड़ेगा उसको. आपके लिए बनाया ठीक है. बेहतर है कुछ नहीं.
Bokhari sahab, brothers and sisters and children, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to share with you some information about Kashmir. I'm sure many of you are quite familiar with it. But before I proceed, I'd like to say that I'm also grateful that I've been asked to speak in English rather than Urdu. And the reason for that is that I've spent most of my life outside Pakistan. My Urdu is not as good as I can express myself in English. And so I hope you won't mind. I'll speak in English, and of course I can probably slip into Urdu as well periodically. But I feel more comfortable speaking in English. Now, I was asked to talk about Kashmir, and of course its strategic importance, and also give a little bit of a background as to how and why Kashmir has become such a hot issue. Of course, over the last few weeks, I'm sure you've been following the media, starting from the night of August 4th to August 5th, when India unilaterally abrogated 2 articles of the Indian Constitution, Articles 370 and Article 35A. And I want to give you a brief background of what the significance of these articles is before we proceed further, and then I'll go into a little bit of history as to where Kashmir stood before India and Pakistan came into existence. Our young sisters have already talked about its importance, etc., but I'll elaborate a little further. Article 370 is an article that grants special status to Kashmir in the Indian Constitution. And this was agreed upon between Nehru, who was the Prime Minister of India at the time, as well as Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah, who was one of the Kashmiri leaders. His son Farooq Abdullah and his grandson Umar Farooq Abdullah have been chief ministers of Indian occupied Kashmir in the recent past, and so on. Under Article 370, India granted special status to Kashmir in the sense that apart from 3 issues, all the other issues relating to Kashmir would be determined by the Kashmiris themselves. And the 3 issues that were taken by the central government in Delhi were: number 1, defense; number 2, trade; and number 3, foreign affairs. Okay, these were the 3 issues that Delhi would manage, whereas all the other matters relating to their internal affairs would be managed by the government established in Srinagar. And of course, we need to go back as well from that, but I just wanted to touch on this with respect to Article 370. Now, there is Article 35A also in the Indian Constitution, under which non-Kashmiris were forbidden from purchasing land in Kashmir, so that the population of Kashmir would not be diluted. And Article 35A was not agreed upon after 1947. In fact, this was agreed upon in 1927 by then ruler of Kashmir by the name of Hari Singh. Now, somebody, of course, mentioned that, the ruler of Kashmir was a Hindu, Hari Singh. And this is one of these aspects which relate to British intrigue, that wherever they have ruled and when they have left problems behind. You can look at areas like Kashmir, you can look at areas like Palestine, you can look at Cyprus, you can look at Sudan. In fact, anywhere that the British went, these troublemakers, they are the universal troublemakers. Although, I've studied in England and I used to have debates with them, and I used to tell them that you are the source of all the problems in the world. And you have created this mess for us in this region as well. Now, when India and Pakistan were to be created, there was a simple formula that was agreed upon. And that formula was that in India, wherever the Muslims constituted a majority, those areas would constitute Pakistan. And wherever Hindus constituted a majority, those areas would go to India. And of course, in much of the country, this was fairly straightforward. Like, if you if you look at the map of India, central India, etc., was predominantly Hindu. And then, of course, in Bengal, there was a large concentration of Muslims. and then you come to the peripheries, which we refer to as the western borders of India, since they adjoined Central Asia, so this area was predominantly Muslim. So it was relatively easy for these areas to be sort of, partitioned off, and the Muslim areas became Pakistan and Hindu areas became India. But at the same time, there were 562 princely states. Now this is where the British intrigue came into play. These princely states, the overwhelming majority, in fact, apart from 3, all the others were basically nothing more than a city-state. A city in which there is a ruler and he's been given land by the British. And imagine the British, who were foreigners who came to India, and now they started distributing the land of India among the people of India and saying, okay, I give you this land, so you are the ruler over here. I give you this land and you are the ruler over there, etc., etc. In fact, even today, what you see in Pakistan, feudalism in Pakistan, is the direct result of British intrigue. And in fact, what it is that when there was an uprising against the British in 1857, and this uprising, of course, was led by the Muslims predominantly, those Muslims who betrayed their fellow Muslims, and they were all in the areas of Punjab and Sindh and so on, and Balochistan and what was previously called Northwest Frontier Province, those Muslims who betrayed their fellow Muslims, after the uprising of 1857 was crushed, the British gave these people massive land estates. So all of the people in Pakistan today that you call the landlords, whether they are the Tewanas, the Khizr Hayats and the Bhuttos and so on, the feudal lords all over, they are all children of bloody traitors to the Muslims. Each and every one of them. In fact, Mumtaz Sultana, who was himself a feudal lord, in 1948, Pakistan established what was referred to as the Agrarian Reform Commission. And Mumtaz Sultana himself, a feudal lord, he was the chairman of that commission. He wrote in that report that not a single Muslim in Pakistan today can trace their ownership to these lands beyond 1857. Sultana himself wrote this. He himself was a feudal lord. In other words, all of the lands that were given to these feudal lords were given by the British because these feudal lords, before they were feudals, they had actually betrayed their fellow Muslims, and because of their treachery to Muslims, they became these lords. And the same thing applied to these princes, so-called princes that the British established. And what the British always do is they go on the basis of divide and rule. Okay, so wherever there is a Muslim majority, they planted a Hindu ruler. Wherever there was a Hindu majority, they planted a Muslim ruler. So the 562 princely states, most of them were in this configuration, but the overwhelming majority, in fact almost all of them except 3, were insignificant. Now, these were very small areas, so once partition took place, they just disappeared, they dissolved. But the 3 that became a little bit of a problem were the 3 states, Hyderabad, Deccan, which had a Nizam of Hyderabad, a Muslim, is a very, patron of the arts and education and so on. I'm sure we are familiar with Osmania University, a very famous university. Then there was the state of Junagadh and Manavadar, and the third was Jammu and Kashmir. Now, Hyderabad had a Hindu majority population, but a Muslim ruler. And Junagadh and Manavadar also had a Hindu majority population, but a Muslim ruler. Whereas Jammu and Kashmir had a Muslim majority, but a Hindu ruler. So, the Nizam of Hyderabad, of course, being a patron of the arts and education and culture and so on, he expressed the opinion that he wanted to join Pakistan. Nehru immediately told him the majority of the population is Hindu. So he ordered the Indian army to go and invade Hyderabad, and it was taken over by force. The same thing happened with Junagadh and Manavadar. Although Junagadh and Manavadar were right on the borders with Pakistan, close to the area that, if you are familiar with the Pakistani map in the Run of Kutch and that area, around Sindh. Again, the same argument was used by Nehru. Junagadh and Manavadar is predominantly Hindu. You cannot go with Pakistan. You have to be part of India. When it came to the issue of Kashmir, that's where Indian hypocrisy came into play. So India said, well, the ruler wants to be with India, therefore we're going to take over Kashmir. Okay, that's really the bottom line of this whole crisis. But I want to take you a little further back, and that is that in 1875, Kashmir was sold by the British to Gulab Singh, okay, who was the father of Hari Singh, for a price of 750,000 pounds. Now, of course, the British didn't own Kashmir, but because of their intriguing nature, they created that issue that they sold. They said, okay, we are going to sell it to you. Gulab Singh was a rich man. He had a lot of money, a lot of wealth. And so for 750,000 pounds, the whole of Kashmir was sold to him. So it virtually became his private estate. But of course, the population of Kashmir, as our young daughters pointed out, predominantly Muslim. And I'd like to make a slight correction in that the population of Jammu at the time of partition was 60% Muslim and about 40% Hindu. And of course, the Kashmir Valley, which is Kashmir, the valley itself, and then you have the Ladakh. Ladakh sort of comprises two parts. One is Kargil, which is again predominantly Muslim, and then Leh, which is basically Buddhist. In Jammu, immediately after partition of India and Pakistan, the Hindus started, with the backing of the Indian government and Indian army, they started a massacre of Muslims. And so within a few months, about 350,000 Muslims were driven out of Jammu into the areas that today constitute Mirpur and those areas in Azad Kashmir, and of course also areas around Sialkot, etc. The Times of London actually had an article regarding this in October or December of 1947, in which it mentioned that 350,000 Muslims were driven out, and after the Hindus perpetrated a massacre of the Kashmiris in Jammu area, and the other people were so scared and terrified that they all had to flee. Not all, but a lot of them fled Jammu and came and settled either in the area with Pakistan or in area that is now Azad Kashmir. At the time of partition in 1947, there was general understanding that Kashmir would become part of Pakistan because of its predominantly Muslim population. I mean, the valley itself had 97% Muslim population. Jammu itself had 60% Muslim population. So there was, in terms of the partition plan, which had clearly stipulated that any princely states that wish to make a decision, and the decision was only either to go with India or with Pakistan. There was no decision of going independent. There was no such option available in the partition plan. That it was also stipulated that several factors have to be taken into account. Number one, the population composition. So if it's predominantly Muslim, then it should go with Pakistan. If it's predominantly Hindu, it would go with India. Number two, geographical contiguity. That Kashmir, if it is contiguous with the area that goes to Pakistan, then it becomes part of Pakistan. And of course, the wishes of the people and cultural affinities. Now, if you look at Kashmir, its culture is more Central Asian than Indian. And as was pointed out, you have a very, very small strip of Afghan territory that's called the Wakhan Corridor, but beyond that is all Central Asia. You have, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and so on. So basically, Kashmir was linked with Central Asia, and their culture is all Central Asian. In fact, and before partition, Kashmir was intrinsically linked with the areas that became part of Pakistan. So the way the land is, the geography is structured, it basically, Kashmir sort of, naturally slides towards Pakistan. As was pointed out, all the rivers from Kashmir flow into Pakistan. That's because that's where you have the high mountains, the water flows to the lower area. Kashmir's telegraph and telecommunications and postal services were all linked with Pakistan. Electricity all was linked with Pakistan. All of its roads were linked with Pakistan. So it was a natural link with Pakistan. India had nothing to do with it. India had only one road at that time that linked through Jammu into Kashmir. And of course there was another intrigue that was perpetrated by the British when the Radcliffe Commission came in order to divide these districts. There was a district called Gurdaspur. This should have gone to Pakistan, but since it was allocated to India, so it provided a link for India into Kashmir. Now, India uses this argument that on October 27, 1947, the Maharaja of Kashmir, Hari Singh, signed an instrument of accession to India. Let me give you a little bit of a background to that as well so that we are clear about how this whole problem emerged. In September of 1947, Hari Singh had entered into a standstill agreement with Pakistan, which meant that whatever services and facilities Pakistan is offering to Kashmir, they would continue to be offered until Hari Singh makes up his mind as to what he wants to do, whether he wants to go with India or with Pakistan. I mean, in his mind, he thought he'd probably go for independence, but that obviously was not an option. Of course, the people of Kashmir wanted to be part of Pakistan, and when they saw that their ruler is hesitating, they staged an uprising against him. So there is an uprising in Kashmir, and the people started to march towards Srinagar. They converged from different parts of Kashmir, which is Srinagar, of course, being the capital city. And the Maharaja, Hari Singh, fled Srinagar on October 26th of 1947. And he fled to Jammu, and he, of course, sent an appeal to India for help. The Indian government said that we are only going to help you if we have some kind of illegal agreement by which we can come to help you. And that is what the instrument of accession refers to. But that instrument of accession was a provisional arrangement, not a final arrangement. And in fact, research has shown that Indian troops did not arrive in Srinagar on October 27, 1947, as it is often called. Research has shown that Indian troops were already present in Srinagar on October the 1st of 1947. So this instrument of accession was simply a fraud, a cover for India to have a justification to send its troops into Kashmir to occupy Kashmir. And so as the people of Kashmir had risen up, and of course the Maharaja was known as a tyrant, the first uprising had actually occurred in 1931 against his rule. So you can see that long before the India and Pakistan came into existence, that there were rumblings of revolt in Kashmir. So the people, as they rose up against the Maharaja, and of course his army perpetrated massacres against the people, tribesmen from Pakistan also went into Kashmir. And of course now you have the Indian army, you have the people of Kashmir, and you have these tribesmen from Pakistan, my ancestors, all always fighting everywhere, in Afghanistan, frontier, everywhere. They went into Kashmir and they started helping their Kashmiri brothers. Of course, they made stupid mistakes as well. The areas that they liberated, they started looting and plundering and so on. This nature of, that this is Male Ghanimat, you can grab it, etc. And that gave India the opportunity to sort of strike back. And of course, Pakistan got involved in it. And then for some reason, India took the matter on January the 1st, 1948 to the Security Council. It was India that took the matter to the Security Council, not Pakistan. In fact, if the war had continued, there is definitely ample reason to assume that perhaps Pakistan or Pakistani army and tribesmen and with the people, they would probably have taken over the whole of Kashmir. But India took the matter to the Security Council and said to the Security Council that we want you to resolve this dispute for us. Prior to that, when the Maharaja had signed that provisional instrument of accession, both Nehru, who was the Prime Minister of India, as well as Lord Mountbatten, who was the first Governor General of India, who was the last Viceroy, and then he became the first Governor General of India. They both said publicly, and this is available on record, they said that this instrument of accession is only a provisional arrangement, and the final decision about the future of Kashmir has to be made by the people of Kashmir. Okay, so this is recorded, this is available in books, this is, there are, radio recordings, there are written documents available of Nehru statements, of Mountbatten statements, etc. The matter ends up in the Security Council. The Security Council takes up the matter and they discuss the issue, and they issue a first resolution, resolution number 39, in January of 1947. And of course, based on that resolution, the Security Council establishes a commission for India and Pakistan. Now, it's interesting that, Canada is involved in that whole affair right at the beginning. And that's what anytime I meet Canadian officials, I pointed out to them that you were involved in it right at the beginning and you have a responsibility to resolve this issue. And how were they involved? At that time, Canada happened to be one of the rotating members of the Security Council. And there's a Canadian general by the name of General Andrew McNaughton, who was the president of the Security Council, because Canada happened to be the rotating president of the Security Council. And he was tasked with formulating a solution to this problem. So the United Nations Commission for India and Pakistan comes into existence, and in April of 1948, resolution number 47 is passed. And what that resolution calls for is three things. Number one, an immediate ceasefire. Of course, there were still skirmishes going on in Kashmir. An immediate ceasefire wherever the forces are. Number two, that both India and Pakistan must withdraw the bulk of their forces from Kashmir. India was given this additional leeway that it can maintain sufficient forces in Kashmir to maintain law and order. And that, I believe, was one of the lacunas or the weakness in that resolution, which India basically used to its advantage. And the third was that once law and order has been restored, that a referendum, a UN-supervised referendum, would be held in Kashmir to determine the wishes of the people. India completely agreed to that, Pakistan agreed to that, they both agreed to that, nobody quivered about it. But regrettably, what has happened is that only and only the ceasefire was put into place and nothing else was agreed upon. Pakistan refused to withdraw its forces because it said, if we withdraw our forces from the area that was under Pakistani control, which is called Azad Kashmir, then India can march its forces into that area as well. So we want the two countries to withdraw their forces simultaneously. And India insisted, no, Pakistan has to withdraw first. We cannot do so. We have to maintain law and order, etc. Even though Indian leaders constantly kept on talking about the fact that they are committed to holding a referendum. And then from 1948 until 1957, the matter went back and forth between the Security Council. 17 resolutions were passed relating to the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. And in each resolution, they referred to the previous resolution, and then they said that a referendum has to be held, an internationally supervised referendum. After 1957, the Indians started to backtrack. And the background to this was that India had prior to that got Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah on its side and Nehru told Sheikh Abdullah that we are going to make you the Chief Minister of Kashmir and you accept our overlordship over Kashmir. So unfortunately, politicians, they, for their personal interests, they compromise their position, they compromise their people. So Sheikh Abdullah accepted that, he was made the Chief Minister. And in 1953, Nehru arrested him and put him in jail again. So Sheikh Abdullah ends up in jail. Nehru betrays his sort of promises. And then in 1954, he releases Sheikh Abdullah and he sits down with him and he says, okay, now we need to work out some arrangement. And the arrangement was that the original agreement that came to be incorporated under Article 370, that Kashmir would have a significant measure of autonomy. It would not be part of India. It would have a significant measure of autonomy. That Sheikh Abdullah would become the chief minister, and India would control defense, foreign affairs, and trade for Kashmir. So this was what was incorporated into Article 370 in 1954. And of course, after a little while, Sheikh Abdullah was again arrested, thrown in jail, and he spent his life, in and out of Kashmir. In fact, I do recall in 1964, I was a young student in Lawrence College, which is in Murray, which is on the border with Azad Kashmir. We were told by our principal that we have to go to, Bansra Gully. Bansra Gully is about a kilometer south of where our school was located. And the reason was that Sheikh Abdullah had come to Pakistan, and he was traveling with Ayub Khan, who was the president of Pakistan, in a motorcade, and we were called to sort of, stand there waving Pakistani flags and shouting, Sheikh Abdullah Zindabad and Ayub Khan, President Ayub Khan Zindabad. And of course, we were young kids. We sort of, we went there. We sort of saw Sheikh Abdullah and President Ayub Khan driving past and sort of waving to us, etc. And we didn't know what the significance of all this was. We were, young 11, 12, 13-year-old kids. No idea what was going on, but at least we knew that there's something important is going on. We also knew that, Kashmir has to be part of Pakistan, because it was instilled in our minds, because the word Pakistan itself, the K is for Kashmir. And that was inherent in the very, nature of the formation of Pakistan. But anyway, unfortunately, nothing came out of that, Ayub Khan, Sheikh Abdullah's visit, and Kashmir continued, unfortunately, to recede further and further into the background. And I'm sure you probably are aware that in 1965, India and Pakistan waged a war over Kashmir. Again, I can tell you that I knew, now I was a little older, I knew intimately exactly what was going on. And recently I read the book by Lieutenant General Mahmood Ahmad, who actually happened to be an old student of Lawrence College. I knew he was about 2-3 years senior to me. In that book, he has detailed exactly what had happened. But even before I read what General Mahmood had written, I already knew, because in August of 1965, or in fact prior to that, in May of 1965, Pakistan had already started a plan that they are going to send commandos into Kashmir and stage an uprising over there. And we knew about this in Lawrence College because the divisional commander, General Hussain Malik, who was in Murray, it was 12th Div headquarters, his sons were studying with us in Lawrence College. So every morning when they would come, as boys would do, we'd sit down and we'd discuss the details and find out what was going on. And we were told that, Pakistani commandos have gone into Kashmir and there were sort of, operations taking place here and there. And then on August 31st, we heard of the first casualties of Pakistani army troops. There was actually an old student of Lawrence College, Major Raza Shah, who was actually martyred in Chamjodia, which was right on the Sialkot Jammu border. And Major Raza Shah was given Sitara-e-Jurat. He was martyred. He was in the armored corps. His younger brother was a student with us, and of course he left Lawrence College on August 31st. He went home because the news came that his brother had been martyred. Although Major Raza Shah's body was retrieved much later after the war ended back in, it took another 2-3 months after the bodies were exchanged. And I sort of, have a personal link with this Chamjodia affair because in 1965, Pakistani forces had made tremendous progress under the command of General Hussain Malik. They had taken both Cham as well as Jordia. And the other place that if Pakistani forces had taken, which was Akhnur, which was about 6 kilometers inside Jammu, if Pakistan had taken that, then the whole of 3 divisions of the Indian army would have been bottled up in Kashmir, because there was no other link for Indian forces to go into Kashmir by road. And General Akhtar Hussain Malik had requested Ayub Khan to give him 2 brigades, and he's going to take Akhnur as well in a matter of days. Now this is where the twist of history comes in, and I'm absolutely appalled because I know this from people that are intimately involved with this. There are people that have written books about this. I've read those books. One of them, in fact, happened to be Colonel Zafar who wrote about it. He was actually the head of SSG, and he flatly refused to send Pakistani commandos into Kashmir, saying that you want to carry out a guerrilla operation, you have not prepared the population over there. If you do that, you're going to lose. And they didn't listen to him. They removed him from there, transferred him to Sialkot. But anyway, for some strange reason, instead of giving those 2 extra brigades to General Akhtar Hussain Malik, Ayub Khan moved him from there and appointed General Yahya Khan as the commander of 12th Div. And unfortunately, Yahya Khan made no progress whatsoever till the war ended on September 23rd, 1965. And there are so many other sad aspects of missed opportunities, of blunders that the Pakistani military at the top level, not the officers. I will tell you, the Pakistani officers up to the level of colonel are absolutely brilliant. They are second to none. I take my hats off to them. The sacrifices that Pakistani young officers have made are more than any other army in the world. No army can match them. But it's only when you reach the top level that the corruption seeps in, and that is where the betrayal takes place. And as I mentioned, that I have a personal sort of link with the Cham Jordia thing, that in December of 1971, when the war between India and Pakistan broke out again, and of course there was this Bangladesh aspect, that a young uncle of mine who was a captain in the army, again in the armored corps, he was martyred on the assault on Cham Jordia in December of 1971. He also was given Sitara-e-Jurrat for bravery and so on. He was 23 years old. So you can see that a lot of blood has gone into trying to retrieve our rights. By the way, I'm not a Kashmiri, I'm a Pathan, but I feel very deeply for Kashmir. I feel deeply for the people of Palestine and anywhere that there are injustices, because I think that we ought to be standing up and speaking for truth and justice wherever it may be. And so, unfortunately, Pakistan has missed a lot of opportunities in Kashmir. Now we are at a stage where I'm afraid things have reached a point where if there is a war that breaks out between India and Pakistan, and I pray to God that it does not, but I really don't really see any other way that this issue can be resolved, that if a war breaks out, I really fear that this time it's going to be a nuclear war. Because India's army is about 4 times the size of Pakistan's army. India's defense budget is about 6 or 7 times larger than Pakistan's defense budget. And so, in a conventional war, Pakistan may not be able to withstand an Indian onslaught. And if Pakistan is going to lose in a massive way, in fact, there is even fear. If you look at the map of Pakistan, in the middle, Pakistan is quite narrow. From Sialkot, Lahore, Gujranwala, all the way up to Sindh, the Pakistani territory is quite narrow. And India can easily cut off, if they were to come through Rajasthan, they could cut off Karachi from the rest of Pakistan, and you would have Pakistan completely destroyed. And if that were to happen, obviously, Pakistan would have no option but to use nuclear weapons. And that would be absolutely catastrophic, because nuclear weapons are not toys. They cannot be taken lightly. They have to be taken, they cause massive destruction. If you have read stories about what the Americans did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, hundreds of thousands of people were killed, and then millions of people died afterwards as a consequence of that horrific crime that was perpetrated. And nowadays, those nuclear weapons are much, much more lethal than they were at that time. So they're going to have a major catastrophe. And Kashmir is bordered not by 3 nuclear powers, but I'd say 4 nuclear powers. And the 4th one, of course, is Russia. Central Asian republics are essentially under Russian influence. They may be quote unquote independent, but they're not really independent. I also want to touch on this aspect of what Pakistan is doing at the present time and whether it can achieve any results. I'm afraid much of the world does not pay any attention to what happens to Muslims. We are the world's bad guys. Anything that happens that is bad is immediately attributed to Muslims and Islam, and so we are vilified. And it does not suit the West's purpose to do anything for the Kashmiri people. And I've talked to many decision makers in Pakistan, their diplomats, their generals, and so on. The question that I ask them, I say, what is your strategy for liberating Kashmir? Do you have a strategy? Or you just, anything, you hold a function and you think that's a strategy? I said, that's not a strategy. You hold a rally, you think that's a strategy? That's not a strategy. Have you got any measures or yardstick as whereby you say, okay, we did this, so we achieved this. We did this, we achieved that. What India has done today is a declaration of war. They have usurped Kashmir. So I said, what are you going to do? And I asked some generals as well. I said, did you not, in your own calculations, figure out that if India did that, what would be your strategy? Didn't you have any contingency plans? And they say, well, we didn't think India would do that. And I said, isn't that stupid? I mean, you are supposed to, you take billions of dollars in defense budget, and you don't even think of these things. This was the same mistake that Pakistan had made in 1965. And unfortunately, that was because Bhutto had hoodwinked Ayub Khan, a military general, into believing that if we went into Kashmir, India would not attack on the international border. I mean, if you prick somebody over here and then you think that he's not going to attack you on your weak spot, that's utter fallacy. That's complete nonsense. Anytime you pick up a fight with somebody, you have to cover all your flanks. You cannot assume that your enemy is not going to do something, stupid or something nasty. You should be prepared for the worst. You should think of any possible scenarios that can emerge. And do you know that when the Indians attacked Pakistan on September the 6th, 1965, Pakistan had absolutely no troops on the Lahore border. Lahore is only 20 kilometers from Wagah, from the Indian border. The Indian army came all the way into Jimkhana Club in Lahore, and they didn't find anybody. People were going about their business. And the Indians thought, oh my God, it's a trap. The Pakistanis have laid a trap for us. Our army has come in. Then they started fleeing back. And God saved Lahore from the Indians. Otherwise, Lahore was gone. I mean, this is the kind of stupidity that these generals went into. There are so many other horror stories. I don't want to go over there, but I want to come to the point as to what you and I can do with respect to Kashmir. I think, we should not remain silent. We cannot. I don't think that that's an option for us. Whenever there are horrors taking place, it becomes our obligation to take a stand. And I know people will say, well, what difference does it make? And I always remind them of this story, which is really very important for us. And that story relates to the time when Ibrahim a.s. was thrown into the fire. And of course, it was a huge pit that Nimrud threw him into. And there are people standing, watching, etc. And there's a bird. And the bird would run to a pond and pick up a small drop of water in its beak and come and throw it on the fire. And the angels, of course, were witnessing this. And they asked the bird, they said, what are you doing? I mean, this could make no difference to the fire. So why are you doing this? And the bird said, On the day of judgment, when Allah asks me that my faithful servant was being burnt in fire, what did you do? And I'll say to Allah, oh Allah, that was my capacity to pick up a little bit of water and throw it on the fire. That's all I could do. So I ask each and every one of you, take a lesson from this bird. Don't think that whatever you do is going to go to waste. Whatever you can do, you have to do. And this is what I'm going to suggest to you that you should do. And I've been telling this, wherever I've spoken about this, I've told people that this is what we need to do. Elections are coming in 4 or 5 weeks' time. Candidates will be coming to your door. They'll ask for your vote. Ask them a simple question. Will you speak for Kashmir? If you do, you have my vote. If you don't, goodbye. Simple. You're not doing anything illegal. You are exercising your legitimate democratic right. In fact, you know, when the crisis started, on August the 6th, we launched an online petition sending letters to Trudeau as well as to Chrystia Freeland, Minister for Foreign Affairs. 2 days later, on August the 8th, we got, in those 2 days, about 2,000 letters had gone to all of them, to Chrystia Freeland, to Trudeau, to the opposition leader Andrew Scheer, to Jagmeet Singh, all the other political leaders as well. 2 days later, we got a letter from Trudeau's office saying that we have received your letter. Thank you very much for bringing this matter to our attention. Since this matter is handled by our foreign minister, Chrystia Freeland, we are forwarding your letter to Chrystia Freeland as well for necessary action. So this was on August the 8th. On August the 12th, we got a message from Chrystia Freeland's office asking to meet us. Prior to that, I've been trying for years. These people don't even want to know us. On August the 12th night, I got a call from her office that she wants to meet us. And when I say we, I meant we have a committee which we call it the Friends of Kashmir Canada. It's a group, it's registered. And they said we want 5 members of your group to come and meet the minister in Toronto in her office. She has an office in downtown Toronto as well. So we went there, 5 of us, plus there were 2-3 others from other, from Kashmir, from occupied Kashmir. We spoke to her. She gave us 1 hour to talk to her about the situation. And we put forward 2 demands to her. Number 1, that at the end of August, which was August 24th, 25th, there was going to be the G7 meeting in France. We said, you are going to France to the G7 meeting. We want you to please raise this matter at the G7 at Biarritz, where the meeting is taking place. And she said, yes, this is what we were planning to do. In any case, because Canada is unilaterally cannot do anything. But if collectively we raise our voice, then we can do something. And the other thing that I asked her was that if the Liberals are elected and you are again the foreign minister, do you pledge to us that you are going to hold hearings about Kashmir in the Foreign Affairs Committee? And she said, if we are elected and if I'm the foreign minister, I'll give you that pledge. Okay, so at least we extracted something from her. And we've been checking as to what the number of letters that have gone so far. It's now more than 10,000 letters that have gone to all of these various people. So in other words, we have made Kashmir a part of this campaign that is occurring in Canada today. It's a great opportunity for us. Number 2, I urge each and every one of you to boycott Indian goods. I think this is a very democratic, very peaceful way of expressing our displeasure. I have boycotted Indian goods since 1972, when my young uncle was martyred in December 71. I don't watch Indian films, I don't buy Indian goods. Even if they're not available, I say, it doesn't matter. I won't starve, I won't die. I mean, if I don't buy whatever, I don't know what kind of rice India sells, whatever, but there is Pakistani rice, there is Afghan rice. We can make a difference. In mid-August or end of August, there was going to be a big concert in England at which Bollywood actors and singers, etc. were coming. Pakistanis and Kashmiris boycotted that concert
and that concert was cancelled because they couldn't sell enough tickets. In England, they're selling Indian rice, which normally sells at 17.99 pounds per bag. They dropped it to 11.99 pounds because nobody was buying their rice. I think, civil society can do these things, and I think we should be doing it as well. And number 3, and this is something that I've done for the last 10, 15 years now here, that we speak to our fellow Canadians. I interact with non-Muslim Canadians, with academics, with labor movement, with other people. In fact, right now I'm in contact with a number of international lawyers. We are planning to institute a war crimes tribunal against Modi, right here in Canada. And I've spoken to a number of international lawyers and judges, and some of them have given me their word that they are willing to participate in that. And as this develops, I will let you know. But I think it's something that we need to, even though this is a not an official thing, but it will generate publicity. It would put a spotlight on the crimes that India is committing in Kashmir. There are horrific crimes. I mean, I can give you statistics after statistics. It's unbelievable as the amount of horrors that are being perpetrated over there. Even now, since August the 5th, about 25,000 Kashmiri youths have been picked up and nobody knows where they've disappeared to. 25,000 of them. That's a horrendous number. Prior to that, there were instances of thousands of them picked up and they just simply disappeared. There were mass graves discovered in Kashmir. 95,000 Kashmiris have been killed since February of 1989. More than 11,000 Kashmiri girls and women have been raped since 1989. And not one person has been charged with this crime or prosecuted. I mean, these are the crimes that are documented. Even the United Nations Human Rights Commission documented these crimes. In June of 2018, when the first report came out of the Human Rights Commission, they documented each and every one of these using Indian sources. Then they followed it up in July of this year, again 2019, with another report, again documenting these crimes. And I can say to you that, we also lobbied the UN High Commission for Human Rights, urging them to address these issues. So it means that, whatever little we can do, we should be doing. And we shouldn't remain silent on these things. And finally, we should also be aware of the geostrategic fact that because Kashmir is located in an area that borders China and Pakistan, and that China has launched this CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, whose highway comes through that region, and China has, of course, pledged to invest something like $60 billion in Pakistan. About $20 billion have already been invested, and China's plan is to go all the way to, to go to Gwadar, and then a couple of weeks ago, China also announced that it was entering into an agreement of $400 billion with Iran. So China has this multi-trillion dollars investment projects in this whole region. And of course, China is emerging as an economic as well as military global power. And America is confronting that by aligning with India. So we should have no illusions about the fact that America is going to solve our problem in Kashmir, or the United Nations is going to, they will not do this. In fact, their vested interests are involved in undermining Pakistan and China. So we should be aware of this. So we shouldn't rely on them. We should rely on our own strength and our own power. And I think Kashmir can be liberated. Just look at, Afghanistan. The Americans have been fighting there for the last 18 years, and now they are begging the Taliban, to make a peace deal with them. I used to make a joke about this and said that when the Americans first went into Afghanistan, they used to chase the Taliban to drive them out of power. And then they used to chase them to kill them, and now they are chasing them to make peace. So you can see how things have turned. I think it is possible. The cost of India's occupation in Kashmir can be increased to a point where it will no longer be feasible for India to occupy Kashmir. And that's the time when it will be forced to settle for resolving this dispute. Regrettably, now that Article 35A has been abrogated, that in non-Kashmiris, that is mainly Hindus, are flooding into Kashmir to settle there. India was already settling their military officers over there under the pretext of developing cantonments, etc. But now they are sending other people. In fact, there are Indian businessmen that are saying we are going to invest $65 billion over there, etc., and we are going to do this and that. And they're all obviously going to settle Hindus over there, just as they did in Jammu, whose demographic has been changed from 60% Muslim to now only 40% Muslim. The same is likely to happen in Kashmir, in the valley of Kashmir, which is approximately 97% Muslim. Unfortunately, it will be diluted. And then even if a referendum is held, the majority would be Hindu and Kashmir would be lost then. And the reason why Pakistan cannot afford to lose Kashmir is not because of territory, but because, as our young sisters have pointed out, because of water. You know, all of Pakistan's rivers flow from Kashmir. And if India were to set up dams as they have been doing, there are a number of projects that they have, they can turn Pakistan into a desert. Pakistanis would not simply exist anymore. And that would be an absolute tragedy. And I'm afraid there are, you know, people in Pakistan, whenever I visit, there are people, you know, who like to indulge in drawing room politics. They say, you know, we should develop Pakistan first, forget about Kashmir. Why are we worried about Kashmir? And I point out to them that, okay, I mean, you should have developed Pakistan in the last 72 years. Why didn't you do it? And nobody is holding you back from that. And if you give up Kashmir, I don't know if we are going to be able to develop Pakistan further. But if you lose Kashmir, you are going to lose Pakistan, because Pakistan will be turned into a desert. And that's something that I think we cannot forget. I hope and pray that that doesn't happen. And I hope and pray that there is a resolution to this long festering dispute. But I think we need to play our part to the best of our abilities. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
डॉक्टर साहब क्वेश्चंस लेंगे कुछ ही इंटेंशनली मेरे शॉर्ट 45 मिनट्स के अंदर, ताकि आपको सवाल जवाब आपके कुछ हवाले से हैं तो ज़रूर पूछिए, अगर नहीं है तो मेरे पास तो बहुत सवाल हैं।
Yes, please. Very good question. Actually, the sister is asking whether we got a response from any other party. Actually, you know what happened? Jagmeet Singh was the only one who responded. He sent me a personal email and also to our committee. And he said that we support the right of the Kashmiri people. We are very concerned about what is happening in Kashmir. And he has spoken on television quite openly and frankly. I've seen his statements on Punjabi TV as well, and he said, today it's the Kashmiris, tomorrow it will be the Sikhs, the next day it will be somebody else. So he has actually been very forthright and very courageous, and I must admire him for this. And I would suggest that in any place where you see that the NDP has a chance of winning, I think we should be supporting the NDP. I'll tell you something. In my 45 years of living in Canada, I voted for the Liberals, I voted for the Conservatives, I voted for the NDP whenever I've seen whatever candidates they have in the area. In fact, once the NDP had even offered me to run for them, I turned it down. I'm not into politics. The Liberals had also asked me to run for them. Again, I turned it down. The Conservatives never did, and I don't think they would. But the NDP definitely, and I think there are certain ridings in which the NDP definitely has a chance, a good chance, and I think we should support them. And then there have been other NDP candidates that have openly spoken out about it. For instance, Scott Duvall in Hamilton, a very, very courageous person. He has openly spoken out about it. He has even, met members of the Kashmiri community. He has welcomed them in his office. And he even said that, if I'm re-elected, he's been a member of parliament for the last 2 terms. He said, if I'm re-elected, I'd even like to visit Kashmir to see the situation for myself. So I think, in that sense, I know that, in this area, in the Mississauga area, usually these are liberal things, and of course we have to vote strategically. We don't want the Conservatives, because if you get Conservatives, you get another Harper in power, and that's going to be in real trouble for us. So we have to think of these things very, very carefully. So wherever, if let's say the NDP does not have a chance, go for the Liberals. And whatever you can do, don't vote for the Conservatives, because they are going to destroy us. They are such racists, such bigots. You know what this whole controversy about this Trudeau's black face and brown face, etc. It's a totally artificial crisis that they've created in the media. I mean, he did it 20 years ago in a play. It is not something like, when you want to judge somebody, you should judge them by their record. And you look at Trudeau's record over the last 10 years, or over the last 4 years that he has been Prime Minister. And I think generally speaking, although he has not delivered on everything, but I think he has been quite good in terms of toning down the anti-Muslim rhetoric in this country. And I think we should give him credit for that. And I think we should support those kinds. I mean, look at Andrew Scheer, that blighter didn't even have the decency when there was that massacre in the Christchurch, mosque. He didn't even have the decency to say that an attack had occurred on a mosque. He didn't mention the mosque. He just, we condemn this attack in Christchurch. That's it. When he was pressured, it was only then that he mentioned that it was an attack on a mosque. So that much animosity that man has. So with respect to political leaders, as I said, Jagmeet Singh has responded, and some of his other NDP MPs have responded, and they have been very forthright and forthcoming. Yes. Yes.
So, thank you for your comments. The comments that were historically very, very accurate, and I did not know a lot of them, and so I thank you for that. It really cleared the picture for the Kashmir crisis. Now, when we get subjective, and when we talk as a political activist, that's where the problems come in. Canada, as you mentioned, I did not know they were one of the Canadians in 1948 was the president of the Security Council, and he's sort of responsible. And there's a very famous share, and I'm forgetting the first Mr. but the second Mr. is Usi Attar ke londe se dawa mangte. So we're going back and asking the same people to help us. And then, of course, this is in context of Allama Iqbal, who probably one of the most popular shares is, one of the shares is खुद ही को कर बुलंद इतना के हर तकदीर से पहले खुदा बंदे से खुद मुझे बता दे रही रज़ा क्या है. We again go back to Canada and all of those guys. So there is nothing that is happening to Kashmir, to Muslims, that the Muslims haven't done to themselves. If you want to be critical of somebody, be critical of the Muslims first. For example, Yemen is right there. I mean, what crimes of humanity have been committed there? 100,000. If you wanna condemn somebody, if you wanna boycott somebody, boycott going to the Middle East, boycott going to Saudi Arabia, or buying Saudi Arabian stuff, or Dubai and so on. So when we become political activists, it becomes rather complicated. Now, I will also tell you, if you look at what the values of liberals and conservatives are and what differentiates the two, as a Muslim, your values are tuned more towards conservatives than liberals. And I can just name 2 or 3 very quickly, but without going into too much detail. So if you want to vote now, it may be your personal interest that the Mr. Singh becomes the Prime Minister, or Trudeau becomes the Prime Minister, or stays the Prime Minister. But if you want to bring religion into it, or as Muslims, our values are more tuned towards the conservatives than liberals. And again, you spoke about Trudeau. Picture speaks 1,000 words, as far as I'm concerned. That's
Right.
all I have.
Okay, thank you very
So
much.
if you don't mind, can you please conclude the question now, so the audience who's watching this, probably they're not able to hear him, right?
Yeah.
So just rephrase the questions and then respond to please.
The brother raised a number of points. The first was that why are we turning to the very forces that have, or the powers that have created the problem in the first place? And secondly, he quoted that beautiful couplet from Allama Iqbal that we have to khudi ko kar buland itla ke hab taqdeer se pehle khuda bande se khud puche bata teri raza kya hai. I mean, obviously that is our ideal situation that we have to be in. And third, he mentioned that if we look at the global situation, we would have to point out that Muslims have done a lot of terrible things to fellow Muslims. And then finally, that when we compare between the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party, that the values that the Conservative Party is advocating are much closer to those of Muslims. Okay, so let me deal with each and every one of those individually. First of all, when I say that we have to approach our politicians over here, I do it in the following context. I know that they're not going to solve our problems, but I think we are in a battle. And in that battle, our enemy is India. That is basically targeting us in the context of Kashmir. And whatever we can do to weaken India's position, we should be doing. That's the first point with respect to approaching the political leadership over here. You would, of course, if you've been following what I said, that I do not expect anything from the United Nations, from the US or the West in general to resolve this dispute for us. They created it, they're not going to resolve it. And their interests are such that they won't do it. But here we are, in the context of Canada, we are operating at a different level in terms of undermining India's position. That's the thing, not that it's going to solve the Kashmir dispute. With respect to your point that Muslims have done terrible things to fellow Muslims, and you rightly pointed out Yemen. At the end of 2014, I wrote this book. This is called The Doomed Kingdom of the House of Saud. This was just at the time when King Abdullah was about to die. And I actually traced the origins of the Saudi family and the horrors that they have committed. And in fact, those of you who know me, I've been, we published this magazine, Crescent International, almost coming to its 50th year now, published from here and two other countries around the world. 40 years ago, when I used to write against Saudi Arabia, I was always vilified. There were mosques that threw me out. They said, they do such good things, they look after all these Hujjaj and so on. Why are you constantly speaking against them? I said, I know. Look, they're destroying Islam for God's sake. They're the enemies of Islam. Why didn't you understand this? I think today, almost every Muslim knows what the nature of the Saudi regime is. And as I said, and of course I'm not going to give this book for free because this is my livelihood. You are welcome to buy it for $30. But you can read it. This was written and published at the beginning of 2015. And the things that I analyzed in it as to how the Saudi regime internally is going to eat itself away, all of that information is here. I don't claim to be Nauzubillah, I'm not making any sort of saying that I know the future, but I analyze the situation and I know what happens. And so based on that, my predictions are actually on track. I'm beginning to see, I didn't even know that Mohammed bin Salman was going to be become the crown prince or whatever. I said that the next generation of Saudis are going to get into a conflict among themselves. They're going to fight and they're going to destroy their king. This family is going to be destroyed. And we don't know what takes over, but at least this is what I foresee. With respect to Yemen, from day one, we have been condemning Saudi, Emirati, American, Israeli, British attack on Yemen, on poor people of Yemen. It's a crime against humanity. I've spoken out about it. I've spoken in rallies on it. In the Crescent, I think we also have probably, even in this issue, this is our September issue. We have an article on Yemen as to what the Saudis have done, the horrors that they have committed. And I believe that they should be charged for war crimes. I've said that, and I will continue to say that. Let me come to this aspect of that our values are closer to the conservatives. I'm afraid that's a mistake. That's not really true. I think we need to study the Conservatives' manifesto on their website. You know, I recall 20 years ago when I used to tell Muslims that they should start to think about the NDP. Everybody would raise up the point and say, oh, but they are for gay marriage and this and that. I said, yes, I know. But so is everybody else. Let me give you from the Canadian Parliament. Give you an example from the Canadian Parliament. In 1999, there was a debate in the Canadian Parliament with respect to a definition of marriage. The original definition was that a marriage is between a man and a woman. In 1999, they had a debate in Parliament, and again, the Parliament reaffirmed this definition of a marriage in 1999. 6 years later, in 2005, again in the Canadian Parliament, the same debate came up about the definition of marriage. They abolished the previous definition that marriage is between a man and a woman. It said it is between two consenting adults in 2005. And the Conservatives voted for it. They didn't vote against it. And in 2006, the Conservatives came to power in a minority government. They had the chance, they could have abrogated it, they didn't. So you see, very often we are fooled by these, what you call perceptions of politicians. We should be very careful. There is absolutely no difference with respect to social values between the Conservatives, the Liberals, and the NDP. In fact, the Conservatives are so racist that if they were to come to power, I can clearly foresee that they'll probably set up some camps and they'll probably lock up Muslims over there.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. You can have it. Let me give you an example.
That is just not true.
In January of 2015, January 31st, I remember it very distinctly. It was a Friday. Stephen Harper, still the Prime Minister, but heading towards election, was invited to speak in Richmond Hill, where our center is located. And since we have the media, we receive notifications for visits, etc., from Prime Minister, whatever, whenever they're coming. So we got an invitation to his, as a media person, to his presence over there. Not that I planned to go, but over there, he was asked this question because he was pushing Bill C-24, which was specifically targeting Muslims, specifically. And 3 months prior to that, there was that attack in Ottawa, where a corporal was killed by a mentally deranged person who was accused of being a Muslim because his father was a Muslim, although he was born a Christian, etc. He was asked, Harper was specifically asked, if you had the powers of Bill C-24, and Bill C-24 was not passed yet, if you had Bill C-24, would you have been able to prevent the attack that occurred in Ottawa and a corporal was killed? And Harper's response was absolutely flabbergasting. He said, I don't know whether we would have been able to prevent that attack, but we are going to go after Muslims. He said Muslims. We are going to go after Muslims whether they are being indoctrinated in their mosques or in the basements. That was the statement that Harper made. And I consider that to be a direct assault on me as a citizen. That man had the audacity to accuse nearly 2 million citizens of this country, law-abiding citizens. There was a case of Toronto 18. 18 Muslim youth were arrested on June the 6th, 2006. I was so shocked when I heard about it. I just simply could not believe as to how could this happen. And I consider myself to be fairly well informed. I've got my pulse on the activities and the affairs of the country. I said, how is it possible that I didn't hear about it? And I can say to you that, alhamdulillah, not one of those boys was from our center. They're from all the number of mosques. But when it came to offering them bail, not one Muslim imam or leader had the guts to come forward, step forward and offer them bail. Not one. I don't wish to blow my own trumpet, but I was the only one that went to court and offered bail for a boy that I didn't even know. His father called me and he was crying. He said, my whole family has abandoned me. And I attended the court for months on end to find out what had happened. And this is what I discovered. Those 18 kids, out of whom 7 were of course exonerated because there was no charges against him. One of them just happened to be a brother-in-law of one of the accused, etc., etc. But I mean 11 of them. In court, I discovered that there were 3 RCMP informants. I also happen to know all 3 of those bloody criminals through various means. One of them was Mubin Sheikh, a drug addict, a convicted drug addict, and later on he was even convicted of an assault, and that's how the RCMP blackmailed him, and he was paid $370,000 to mislead these kids into doing these terrible things. It was Mubin Sheikh. There was an Egyptian guy, a failed Egyptian, he was an engineer, he didn't make it into engineering, his name was Sohaimi. His uncle, whom I happen to know, a very, very decent man, who was an engineer who had spent almost all of his life in Oman, and then he retired, he took early retirement, he came back to Canada. He had a 100-acre farm in Orangeville. And he wanted to spend the rest of his life with his family here rather than sort of he was away all the time. And unfortunately, he was a very decent man. I met him several times through some family, friends. He developed cancer, and within about a year or so, the poor man died. So this Sohaimi guy was his nephew. He was also brought by the RCMP into this trap, and he was paid $4.2 million. This is all in the court documents. I've studied them. The defense lawyers showed me all of those documents. And he was the one who trapped these boys, telling them that I can buy ammonia to make the bombs. Because he had a farm, he said we are legally entitled to buy this thing. And the third guy was an Afghan guy by the name of Qari Kifayatullah. That guy used to come to our center as well, and often would tell me I was a bodyguard for Hikmat Yar and this and that, and I know the Taliban, etc. I said, I don't know why is he talking to me like that? But I said, okay, probably he is. And he would come and then he would want money, etc. And later on I discovered, my own son told me, that Qari Kifayatullah had come to me and he said, look what the Canadian government is doing to our brothers and sisters, because Canada had its forces in Afghanistan. Why don't you join us and we're going to blow up this and that? And my son told him, just you go to hell. And my son told me later on, I said, thank God that you said that to him. Otherwise he was going to trap you and me as well. Because I'm so outspoken, they'd say, well, he's the guy that is responsible for it. So there were 3 people that were used by the RCMP to trap 11 other people. And why was Harper doing that? Because he wanted to suck up to George Bush, to say we are tough on crime, we are tough on terrorism, and that's why we have also arrested these people. When you look at the actual evidence against them, unfortunately, none of those people instigated this. It was these 3 criminals that instigated it. And then about a year later, after these boys were convicted, Mubin Sheikh sent a message to me through a mutual friend. He said that, I'd like to meet him and I want to, apologize to the community. My response to him was, I said, you bloody criminal. If you are really sorry about this, the first thing you need to do is to give that $370,000 to the 11 families whose lives you have ruined. When you do that, then I will invite you to my center and you publicly apologize to the community for the crimes that you have committed. Otherwise, I don't want to see your face. But you see, Mubin Sheikh and his entire family was involved in these crimes. His father was in Bell, Canada, and he told me personally, I'm standing in wudu right now, I can swear to God, he told me personally, he said, RCMP would come to us and they would tell us, we want to tap somebody's telephone, would you do it for us? We don't have a court order. And he said, I would do it. His father. So you see, this is how these conservatives and these intelligence agencies are manipulating us. We have to smarten up. We have certain rights. We should not be falling for these traps. And I keep on telling people, I said, look, we are Canadian citizens. we live in this country. If you carry a Canadian passport, then according to the Quran, you have entered into a social contract with the state. You cannot do anything against the state. It is illegal. The Quran does not allow you. The Quran, there are many ayats in the Quran. One says, وَالْمَوْفُونَ بِأَهْدِهِمْ إِذَا عَاهَدُوا. The Quran says, if you have entered into an agreement with somebody, you fulfill that agreement. When we become citizens, we take an oath of loyalty to Canada. We have to be loyal to Canada. We cannot violate the laws of Canada. This is a Quranic command. And so, if we see that somebody is doing something wrong, it becomes our obligation to prevent them from doing that wrong. And I was telling, these Mubin Sheikh, I had sent this message to him as well. I said, you call yourself a Muslim. If you thought that these boys were doing something wrong, it was your obligation to prevent them from doing that wrong, rather than egging them to do that wrong. That is what the Quran says, Amr bil Maruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. Enjoin what is good and forbid what is evil. And you went completely the opposite. You went Amr bil Munkar. You went completely the opposite. You are egging them to go and do the wrong things. Where is your Islam? What kind of a Muslim are you? You wear this long jubba and you have a beard and you wear a bloody topi. That doesn't make you a Muslim. You see, so when we look at the situation over here, we need to look at the broader picture and not get swayed by these things that, the conservatives, social values we share with them, and the liberals and the NDP are way out. Unfortunately, all of them are in the same boat. So I don't think that we can judge them on this basis. We will have to judge them on the basis who's going to cause the greatest harm to us. I think the conservatives will cause great harm to us because of their Islamophobia.
We can take only one more question,
Yes,
a short question in 5 minutes, if you don't mind. Please, Salim Saab.
Okay.
Salim Saab raised the hand. I mean, before anybody else. This is long. We have no time for long questions.
Okay, what I'll do is
Short and
I'll
precise
keep my
questions.
answer short. I'm sorry.
Never good. Never good. Like, yes, Salim Saab. He asked for it.
जो आपने ये जूनागढ़ की और हैदराबाद के इसमें जो चीज़ सामने आई कि जहाँ पे फोर्स काम करती है वहाँ पे ही रिजल्ट निकलता है
सही
और दुनिया की हिस्ट्री बताती है कि जहाँ जो फोर्स जो है वो बातें तो टेबल पे सेट होती हैं लेकिन उसके बैकग्राउंड में फोर्स ही काम करती है जो मैंने यहाँ पे ये जो एक्स जनरल जो है सुने हैं कि अगर यहाँ पे हमें फाइट करनी पड़ेगी और ये जो न्यूक्लियर का वो वेपन्स है दोनों तरफ शायद वर्ल्ड इस पे आके कोई कॉम्प्रोमाइज करवाए हमारा इसके बगैर कोई चारा नहीं। आप इसके बारे में कुछ कहें? अगर ये सोल्यूशन नहीं है
सही
जो मैं भी समझता हूँ सोल्यूशन यही है नहीं है तो फिर उसका वो जो शरफ का जो फार्मूला वो क्या
Exactly. It's a very good point. I mean, basically what he's saying is that the world is governed by might is right. I don't think principles matter anywhere. And I've mentioned this many times in my writings. I've said the principle of might is right operates. And this is what we also learned from the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, that, once the Prophet had acquired power, then everybody wanted to become a Muslim. When he went to Makkah, when he liberated Makkah, all of his enemies lined up over there, they all wanted to become Muslims. But prior to that, they were waging wars against him. So he's right. And I've said this on a number of occasions, even in the recent, this Kashmir aspect. I said, look, the world will only take notice of the Kashmiris' plight if there is a war between India and Pakistan should go full force with all the nuclear weapons. Absolutely. And I'll tell you why Pakistan will come out ahead. There is very little to destroy in Pakistan. If you want to sort of, thank Nawaz Sharif for the mess that he created. There are no factories left in Pakistan. The only any city that you can say has any value is perhaps Karachi. There is nothing else. All the factories in Faisalabad and all these places have been just destroyed. India is a target-rich country. Pakistan can go and destroy Bombay. Bollywood is blown up. Their financial center is blown up. Karnataka, Calcutta, Delhi. You can push back India back into the Stone Age. We'll both be back to zero. That's fine. Then we can start building from there. Yeah, absolutely. Then we can start building. And I've said it publicly. I said, look, that's the only solution. Otherwise, unfortunately, nothing will work. I know. I'll take a couple of other questions just quickly. Just please go ahead, please. Yeah.
ले लें आपके नहीं आएगी बारी आज आगे से सारे सवाल हैं
I want to talk to a member of the parliament. The appointment is for next several weeks, out of question. It's very hard to talk to politicians. So what we must do is, see, there are a lot of pictures about atrocities being done in Kashmir. Take those pictures, you people put it in a piece of paper, several pictures, make copies, send copies to these people who take care of such things. Each copy, each picture will talk 1,000 words and hundreds of lectures. Please do that.
इसको कमेंट ले लें क्वेश्चन ले लेते हैं आगे से
Go ahead.
क्वेश्चन आप लेकर प्लीज जी प्लीज सजेशन है वो तो क्वेश्चन तो लीजिए
देखिए जी मोदी ने जो कुछ किया इट वाज नॉट ए मंकी जंप ओवरनाइट उसने नहीं किया
Correct.
इट वाज प्लानिंग
Correct.
और जैसा आपने बताया कि वहाँ पॉपुलेशन को नंबर्स को चेंज पहले भी किया गया और अब भी किया जाएगा इतना बड़ा कर्फ्यू लगा और लोग वहाँ पर आ रहे हैं कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल वहाँ पर अमेंडमेंट हुई है तो इसके अगेंस्ट व्हाट शुड बी द प्लान ऑफ पाकिस्तान गवर्नमेंट हम लोगों का क्या प्लान होना चाहिए और दूसरा अभी तक एज अ गवर्नमेंट पाकिस्तान गवर्नमेंट ने जो कुछ किया आर यू सेटिस्फाइड विद दैट या इसको कुछ और इम्प्रूव होना चाहिए
Thank you.
आप इसको एक मिनट में कैसे करेंगे
You know, I've always expressed my deep concern about the lack of seriousness by the Pakistani government, and as I mentioned in my talk, that unfortunately, I've not heard from anybody as to what's the strategy. There is no strategy. This is just reaction. Even now, there is only a reaction to what India has done. India has basically usurped Kashmir. It is now a colonial power. It has forcibly occupied Kashmir. It has declared war, and I feel that without war there is absolutely there can be no solution. That's the only solution. That's all that one can say with respect to the present situation, because I'm afraid otherwise it won't result in anything. It just will make on sort of hold rallies, shout, etc., and then settle into the same thing, and that's the end of the story. Okay, and
एक खवातीन से लास्ट क्वेश्चन लेके उसके बाद आप नहीं बहुत शुरू हो गई है
Thank you very much for shedding so much light on this issue. You mentioned just briefly about boycotting Indian products.
Yes.
How can we make that into a bigger thing so that more people are aware of it?
Thank you for raising this point. What we are doing is we are compiling a list, and we're going to be putting it on the internet. We are constructing the Friends of Kashmir website, and we're going to be putting this entire list on that. But anyway, anytime you go to a store, at least you can do your part. You see where it says product of India, don't buy it, that's it, But you're right, we need to put that whole thing on a list so that people can access it, and and also we are doing much more, as this brother pointed out, that you do the pictures, etc. We have printed some brochures, we have them, but what we are also doing is, on the website, we have actually written about Indian fascism and its origins, with links to videos and the horrors that they are perpetrating in India as well as in Kashmir. They are actually chopping people alive. I couldn't see them. They were so horrifying. And these are innocent people. These are like, women that they are, stoning, Hindu mobs or sort of, and then they say, you have to shout Jai Shri Ram and this and that, and Muslims, it's just absolutely mind-boggling. But definitely we will do that. Yes.
I think along with these pictures, we should also highlight the atrocities committed against other faiths.
Yes.
Sikh and Christians especially.
Yes.
Because that's something that they might.
Yes, exactly. We have the atrocities we are taking in a comprehensive sense, not just against Muslims, but also against Christians and Sikhs and Dalits. All of them are included in that. Yes. I think we are coming for Maghrib Salat, and we have to. But I want to mention that I have copies of Crescent. There are a few copies that are available, but these books are available for $30, as well as this book, of which I'm really proud.
need my copy of the
This one is
Can we have a seat for now? We're not done yet. We're not done yet. Zafar sir? Abhi.
After prayers, yes, inshallah. Yes,
जफर साहब का बहुत शुक्रिया अदा करते हैं हम आपकी मकबूल तालियों के अंदर जिन्होंने हमें वक्त दिया। अगेन कोई मसला एक सेशन के अंदर हल नहीं होता। सेशन का मतलब ये नहीं होता अगर इमरान खान आज आप कहते हैं कि मैं कश्मीर का एम्बेसडर हूँ और अमेरिका में मौजूद हैं तो हम एक्सपेक्ट नहीं कर रहे कि वो वापस जाएंगे तो कश्मीर का मसला हल हो गया होगा, या जफर साहब की इस बात के बाद कश्मीर का मसला हल नहीं हो जाता। मसले हल तब होते हैं जब हम खुद उनके ऊपर अटेंशन देते हैं। एक जुल्म जो है ना वो एक प्रॉब्लम है, लेकिन उसको जहालत भी प्रॉब्लम है। ठीक है, हम अगर कुछ चीजों के बारे में नहीं जानते तो ये हमारी जहालत है। जुल्म तब कोई करता है जब आप जाहिल होने का सबूत देते हैं। तो अल्लामा ने शेर में कहा भी था कि बेसिकली एक कैंची होती है, उसके दो एंगल्स होते हैं, सोर्स होती है कैंची की। वो कहते हैं इससे काटा जाता है, एक जुल्म की और एक जहालत की है। जब तक दोनों प्रोवाइड नहीं करेंगे मतलब इससे काम नहीं चलता। तो हम कोशिश करेंगे कि इस बारे में मजीद बात करते रहें। इकबाल और कश्मीर खुद तक बड़ा टॉपिक है। इकबाल ने बहुत कुछ लिखा है कश्मीर के ऊपर, नसर के अंदर भी और नज़म के अंदर भी, पोइट्री के अंदर भी अपना। तो हम कोशिश करेंगे कि सेशन हम उसके ऊपर भी करें, इसके अंदर हम स्पेसिफिकली उन चीज़ों को डिस्कस करें कि इकबाल सारा कुछ कैसे देख रहे थे, नज़में कौन सी हैं, वो जो इकबाल ने वहाँ जाना सारा कुछ भी डिस्कस करेंगे उसके रिलेटेड के अंदर। इसको हम चलाते रहेंगे साथ साथ। आप सबके आने का बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। इंशाल्लाह फिर चंद मुलाकात होती है अगले महीने 20 तारीख को कल सेशन हमारा अक्टूबर के अंदर, कल 20 अक्टूबर का सेशन है नेक्स्ट। उसका भी टॉपिक क्या होगा वो मैं बता दूंगा। राइट, उसको भी देख लेते हैं। चलिए बहुत शुक्रिया आप सबके,